Now, painting trees in the winter can be difficult because all the foliage is gone, and what you're left with is the structure or the basic anatomy of a tree. So it really helps to understand the anatomy of a tree, how the underlying structures line up to make the tree work. Plus, you have all the many tiny branches that you have to deal with, which is just tons of detail. So the question is, how do you simplify that? How do you make it read well as a painting? I'll be talking about the color involved, the basic structure, and how to deal with all the detail and make it more simple and readable as a painting. Okay, there are keys we want to remember when painting trees, and these are things that just kind of help with the drawing, the color, and the composition of trees. They have a definite anatomy to them. They have the main trunk, which is kind of like the spine of the tree, and then the bigger branches, and then the smaller branches coming off that. And there's a way to handle those that makes the tree easier to read. Trunks and branches gradually taper. The main trunk, the main branches will always gradually narrow as they go up or go out. You'll never have a trunk that's wide at the base and just suddenly gets real thin. It's always a real gradual tapering. Or it's wide at the base, gets narrow, and then real wide again, and then narrow. It's always a gradual tapering. Now, once in a while, you'll find an anomaly of a tree trunk that gets wide, then narrow, and then wide again. But that's not common, and in the painting, it ends up looking like bad drawing. So having trees gradually taper is really important. And the color of a tree is always a muted grayed color. So they aren't just gray, not just a black and white, but they're a grayed color. So a gray green, gray violet, gray blue, gray red, gray orange. I've seen all different colors of gray, but they are a muted grayed color. But don't just make them a flat gray. Make them a grayish color. And lastly, stagger the shapes and sizes to create more interest. You don't want trees that are all the same size or all on the same plane. So looking at some paintings I have here of some trees I've painted through the years. Here's the idea of the tree trunks, again, gradually getting thinner as they go up. And there's always one main trunk on a tree that holds up all the bigger branches. And then off the bigger branches are these smaller branches on the tree. And that's what we want to simplify and create a mass with. But I'm also reducing the big branches. I'm not trying to paint every one I see. I want to pick out just the main ones that kind of help define the tree. And again, gradually tapering. Also, as they change direction, you want to try and be a bit more angular. Again, I've got the tree trunk here. This is the main tree trunk here. And as I'm changing direction in these branches and the tree trunk, I'm trying to keep everything more angular. It's so easy just to round things off. And they end up looking like, especially the bigger branches or bigger trunks, they end up looking like wet noodles. Now, some of the smaller branches, a bit more rounded, but even there, I usually like to keep them a little more on the angular side. It just makes them look more solid. These trees over here even, just a bit more angular as it holds up all that foliage there. And then you have the smaller branches, and that's the detailed part that we want to simplify. It becomes way too busy when we look at those branches if we start trying to see them individually. So I want to simplify them into masses or shapes that kind of help the structure and kind of help set up the tree. I want a nice balance of these shapes, breaking them up with some of these sky holes or holes where you can see the mountain behind it, but trying to see masses and how you design these shapes of these smaller branches really determines the look of the tree. So it's really important to not to get it too symmetrical, not to get it too rounded. You want it more natural looking. So designing those smaller branches is real important. And a lot of these tree trunks, tree branches, like this is a sycamore, they can really meander. and have a lot of nice, interesting shapes. But again, you can see I'm trying to be very angular here as it comes out. And always remember where the sunlight is coming from. So the sunlight is coming from the left side here. So that really sets up the dark and light shapes on the trunks and on the bigger branches and the smaller branches that become more of a shape, like this tree back in here on the right side. Those small branches just become a shape, and I have to design that shape to make it look good. And here, thinking color-wise, these bare branches, again, I'm trying to, you're not going to copy the tree exactly. There's just too much going on. So I'm trying to get a basic overall shape for the tree, which is made up mostly of the tiny branches, so the big masses of the small branches, and adding a couple of the big trunks and a few of the big branches there. And color-wise here, I'm looking at, a muted ochre, a muted yellow on the sunlit parts of the branches, and then a muted violet where it's a little bit darker, maybe a bit more in shadow. Here, color-wise too, I'm seeing these trees as a muted violet. So it's more violet with a yellow ochre to mute it. Can be a kind of a grayish violet, and then a darker, cooler violet, grayed violet here in the shadows. Even a little bit of gray-green in there, some gray-red violet. So I think it creates a lot more interest in the tree trunks when you can vary the color. Just remember, there's always going to be a gray version of the color you see.